welcome. You're tuned into TMH English Daily News. The headlines today include Egypt and Sudan's protests to Ethiopia's commencement of the operation of the Grand Renaissance Dam. Abiy Ahmed's National Dialogue Commission has been met with opposition, and CBJ says Ethiopian authorities should end the practice of punitively detaining journalists during this conflict. As we move on to our main news for today, Egypt and Sudan says that the Ethiopia's commencement of operation of the Grand Renaissance Dam is yet another breach of the 2015 agreement on the Declaration of Principles. Scholars have underlined that the context in which the dam is becoming operational is very different to the context in which it was covered and conceived 10 years ago. Egypt's Water Resources and Irrigation Ministry sent a letter to its Ethiopian counterparts in which it said the start of the operation of the Grand Dam is a unilateral step down in the absence of the agreement that governs the filling and operation process. The ministry said that the 2015 agreement on this Declaration of Principles clearly and unequivocally requires Ethiopia to reach a legally binding prior agreement on the rules of filling and operating of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The letter said Ethiopia's unilateral action will have direct adverse impact on the riparian rights as well as the interest of Egypt, and that it threatens to inflict significant harm on it as well. Egypt's Water Resources and Irrigation Ministry reminded Ethiopia of the presidential statement of the UN Security Council on the 15th of September of 2021, calling 3 countries to take forward the negotiation in a constructive and cooperative manner. Eschewing unilateralism is not only a pillar of constructiveness as well as cooperation, but also an indispensable requirement to comply with the Security Council's presidential statement, as it stressed. Egypt's Ministry of Foreign Affairs also made similar accusations, and similarly, Sudan on Monday rejected what it described as a unilateral step by Ethiopia to start the electricity production from the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The Sudanese minister stressed the need for all parties to sit together to reach a unified vision on the GERD file, and saying Sudan's interest is a red line. Alam Ahmed, president of the World Association for Sustainable Development, told Al Jazeera that Ethiopia has kept Egypt and Sudan in the dark on key issues. Let's take a listen.
I think the question of completion, no one can know the answer for that, because there's lots of issues going on. There's lots of legal challenges. The land itself is still disputed. And the situation in both Sudan and Ethiopia is not settling down. So it's a big question mark. But at least now we have seen the production of 1 turbine producing megawatts. So it is on track to produce and to complete. But when is quite a big question. No one really can tell. Particularly, no one knows the technical, what is going on in that dam really is quite difficult to tell. No one has seen the engineering, if you like, paperwork of that dam yet.
He added that Ethiopia has been, in fact, exploiting the internal crisis that's been taking place in the country of Sudan.
Here, number one, in the last 2 years, if you remember, all of you, Ethiopia have used the opportunity. They're very opportunistic. I know this might sound negative, but it's true. When Ethiopia found Sudan in the last 2 years in serious trouble internally, they try to maximize anything dramatically will not be reversed easily. Sudan has been going through a very difficult time. I think, frankly speaking, Sudan has no government as we speak. So there is no one at all challenging or even talking to the Ethiopian now, because we don't have a government in Sudan.
Alex DeWall, executive director of the World Peace Foundation, in his part noted the context in which this dam is becoming operational is in fact very different to the context in which it was conceived 10 years ago.
It was the brainchild of the late Miller Senari. It was the jewel in the crown of the developmental stage. And the reason it's called the Renaissance Dam is that is a shout out to the principles of the African Renaissance, the idea that the African states should band together for collective development, for integration, for cooperation. Now, what has happened since then is 2 transformations. First of all, the developmental state has been abandoned and reversed, and there is a big question mark over the economic future of Ethiopia. And secondly, the political and diplomatic context has been transformed, so that instead of Ethiopia being embedded in an alliance of African nations that actually put Egypt in something of a diplomatic corner, what has happened is that alliance has been dismantled by Prime Minister Abiy, including resulting in the antagonism that exists between Ethiopia and Sudan. And Ethiopia is now becoming very dependent on its Middle Eastern patrons for money and weapons, notably the United Arab Emirates. So it's a very different political context in which there's a lot of turmoil and a lot of distrust.
All right. In spite of Abiy Ahmed's claim that his country does not wish to harm the interests of others, the project is just not sitting well downstream. Staying with the topic of Abiy Ahmed, his National Dialogue Commission has been met with opposition. Political parties have been raising objection to the process of selection of dialogue commissioners, and some have categorically just rejected the trumpeted national dialogue. Government has said that it has finalized the names of 11 people and the persons chosen out of the 42 earlier made public by HOPR who will start the much talked about national dialogue. But at least one of the announced 11 names was not included in the original 42-member list, and another name announced today, Mohamed Derir, was publicly rejected by the Somali regional-based opposition parties ONLF, as well as the Congress for Somali Cause last week. On the 14th of February, the Ethiopian Political Parties Joint Council, a coalition of more than 53 legally registered political parties in Ethiopia, including the ruling PP, has issued a statement requesting the House of People's Representatives to temporarily halt the ongoing proceedings to select the 11 commissioners to lead the planned National Dialogue Commission. It requested that the Parliament to resume the process in an inclusive as well as trustworthy manner. Before that, the Oromia-based opposition parties, Oromo Federalist Congress, the Oromo Liberation Front, and the Somali region-based Ogaden National Liberation Front issued a statement saying the process of the nomination of commissioners was not impartial in fact. Committee to Protect Journalists, also known as CPJ, says Ethiopian authorities should end the practice of punitively detaining their journalists. CPJ said Friday Ethiopian authorities should also drop any plans to charge two journalists, Amir Aman, Kiaro, as well as Thomas Ngida, with terrorism and stop a fresh investigation they are pursuing against the editor, Temrat Nagara. They were among a group of journalists arrested in the weeks after November 2nd in the year of 2021, when Ethiopian authorities declared a state of emergency amid an ongoing civil war. Enlian Abdi, Ethiopia's federal police spokesperson, told CPJ by messaging app that Thomas and Amir had been detained for violating the law that he could not elaborate any further on, as it is a court matter, and redirected CPJ to the Ministry of Justice, and CPJ's email to Ministry of Finance and Justice, was unanswered. As we move on to our second to last story for today, the 43rd Tigrayan peacekeepers in Abyei seeking asylum with the UN. The peacemakers were members of the Ethiopian contingent deployed to Kadguli in Sudan. The Tigrayan peacekeepers who refused to avoid persecution by Abiy Ahmed's regime for their identity have started voicing their opposition to the ongoing genocide that's taking place in Tigray and on their people. Our final news for today, Tigrayans in Kenya rally over missing businessmen. Tigrayans, Ethiopian living in Kenya's capital Nairobi, held demonstrations yesterday against the abduction of a fellow Tigrayan businessman 3 months ago. 39 years old, Samson Takle was stopped by a Kenyan police officer and taken out of his Bentley car in a broad daylight in Nairobi, Kileleshwa neighborhood by people believed to be police officers in civilian clothes. He was dragged into a Subaru car by the men as other road users recorded this drama. In the video, as you see that's playing on your screen that has since gone viral, Samson Takle can be heard pleading with witnesses at the scene to record this capture. Mr. Sampson, businessmen, are in the oil and gas industries, and he was reportedly coming from a meeting when he was abducted. Samson Taklemikael has been in Kenya for close to 16 years, and his whereabouts currently remain unknown, and Kenyan police remain yet to give any detail about his arrest or where he is now. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.